Hello everyone and welcome to Eclectic Book Diary. Today's video I am going to share with you my reading plans for the month of May. Now, before we dive into the actual books, I want to share a little bit of what I was planning or what was going on reading wise in the past few months. First of all, I have kind of went into a reading slump. I went into a reading slump, I would say, from November last year, and it's continued for about 4 months. I wouldn't say I wasn't reading at all because I was still reading, but I was struggling so much. Like, I was reading but just on and off and not really enjoying even the time that I was spending with reading, and that's so unlike me when it comes to how I feel about readings. However, I would say that from March things started to be better, and definitely the month of April, this month, was a definite success when it comes to reading. I managed to finish 9 books in total, and actually the 10th one is this close to be finished. I believe I could do it today, so I'm gonna count 10 books for the month of April. Yeah, I'm so happy about this month. I feel like I have gained the momentum again when it comes to reading, and I am super excited to continue on reading. However, though, I feel if I would to compare the upcoming month with the results of this month, I will be doing myself a disfavor, because I feel I would put so much pressure on reaching almost the same number, and it will be more of a numbers game than an actual enjoyment factor, and I don't want to rely on that whatsoever. I do want to keep on that momentum, and I do want to keep on reading, but in a way that actually makes sense for me, because 10 books a month is not really that realistic most of the months. And most importantly, the reason why I was capable of reading 10 books this month was that half of those books were kind of a very shorter books, and I usually tend to read much longer books, so it feels like I would have to stare my reading preferences just so I could meet up with this number. So I would keep on choosing shorter books just because they are shorter, and that's not really how I usually roll when it comes to reading. I would like my reading to be based on my general interests overall, and also how I am feeling in that exact moment. And I do have a wide variety of books that I want to get through, and most of these books are not short books, so I don't want to limit myself to that region of the whole book debacle thing. So I am actually lowering down the number for the next month. I would like to read 5 or 6 books for the month of May, and also I do want to focus more on a couple or 3 stories in general, because I'm currently reading a couple of long book series or book saga, and one that it's not necessarily that big, but it's also kind of a continuous series of novellas in the realm of fantasy. And I feel if I would introduce more epic fantasy to this equation, things will be a little bit too distracting or too confusing. I honestly just want to retain the information that these stories are giving without feeling a constant pressure or a constant add-ons from other stories. I don't want to be adding on newer realms and worlds and possibly very interesting and intricate worlds, and not being capable of giving the newer stories also their fair share of attention. So I feel like the best way for me to do that is to just simply focus maybe on a couple major storylines, and along the way I would still be reading other books, obviously, because I can't just be reading the same series. Or not that I can't, I prefer not to read the same series until it's finished, especially if it's a long series. It will definitely be better if I don't confuse myself with too many book series at once. To give you more of a context, the two main book series that I'm talking about, the first one, the one that it's really intimidating for me at least, it is the Wheel of Time series. I have started reading the series I think last year, and I have finished 3 books. Before I started, I was super intimidated, and I'm still feeling a little bit intimidated, just a little bit. However, in general, I feel I am not as intimidated as I felt before I started. This series is written by Robert Jordan, obviously, and it contains 15 books in general. Before I read the first book, I wasn't sure of anything. I thought that I might read the first one and then just call it quits, but I actually presumed to reading the second one, but then my reading slump happened actually at the same time as that. It wasn't because of that book, but it just correlated with the fact that I was in a reading slump, and it took me a while to finish the second book. However, I managed to finish the third book last month, including the other 9 books that I've read. So it's not that big of a problem when you are not in a reading slump, obviously, and I actually enjoyed my time tremendously, and I can't wait to continue with the 4th book. However, I still don't know if I will continue with the full series, but now I know that I would at least read up until the 5th book. So even if the 4th book was a disaster, which I'm not saying it will be, I'm just saying even if that happened, I will still read the 5th one, and then afterwards I will decide if I will continue on with the whole series. Just to clarify, book number 4 is called The Shadow Rising. It is a huge book. I looked it up in the audio version of the book, and it's 41 hours plus. It is a huge book. I believe it's gonna take me quite a while to get through it. However, I am getting the e-version of the book, and with the audiobook, so I can combine the two, because I usually prefer that method of reading, the combination of listening and reading. I thrive there, so I probably would do that. I will be getting the physical copies in the near future. I have the first one here on my shelves. However, I decided to hold on the physical copies. I do think that I need to hold up on getting the physical copies until I see how these things will evolve. Now, the second series that I have started, that is also a major series and that had so many people raving about it, and I just, for some reason or another, haven't read anything by the author before I started this series. I'm talking about Brandon Sanderson, of course. And I have started my first read from him with The Way of Kings. And I already can hear people saying, maybe you could have started with other books, maybe Mistborn, because that's the common suggestion for people when they haven't read anything by Brandon Sanderson. A lot of people say, read Mistborn, and I'm not against that. I want to read Mistborn. However, I personally was super intrigued by the premise of the Stormlight Archive series. I like to challenge myself sometimes, and I hear a lot of people saying, oh, this is really complicated. maybe you shouldn't start with that, especially if you haven't read anything by him. And I'm like, no, I am allowed to choose what I want to read at the end of the day. And as far as the Cosmere world goes, I went into the actual website of Brandon Sanderson's works, and you can start with the Stormlight Archive if you want to get into the Cosmere world. You don't have to start with anything else. You can just start with the Stormlight Archive. And I picked up the first one. Believe it or not, that was the book that ignited my awakening from the reading slump. I started that book in March and I finished it in the beginning of April, so I am counting it as an April read. I have to say that it is one of the best books I have read when it comes to fantasy books, in my humble opinion, and I am hooked. I want to know more, and now I would read the second book, which is Wars of Radiance, for the next month. Now, the Stormlight Archive in general has 10 books supposedly in the making, and I believe the 5th book in this series will be out by the end of 2023. So I'm planning on reading the first 4 in this year and the 2 novellas that has to do with this series, and then rereading them next year before the 5th book comes out. I think after reading the first one, it is a type of story that not only deserves a second read, but in my opinion, multiple reads. Not just like once or twice, but maybe preferably even more. I wouldn't say that I didn't understand what was going on in the book. I believe the writing style of Brandon Sanderson helps tremendously with that. You can flow within the books, even though there are multiple intricate things going on. There's an intricate magic system in play, and so many character perspectives, but mainly we have like a few major characters. There's a lot of things going on in general when you are reading, but that doesn't mean that it's necessarily not understandable. All in all, in the end, things will evolve to a point where you will get your answers, and sometimes you will be even shocked, and it's just so epic in my opinion. And I'm already gushing about the book, the previous one, and I can't wait to read the second one. I hear a lot of people saying that this one is their favorites. I don't know whether that will be the case for me as well, but I'm super excited about it, and I just can't wait. I don't know if I'm gonna start the month with it or not, but I'm definitely hyping myself up. I hope I don't get disappointed, but yeah, I think I would not be disappointed. Like, I really loved the first one, so I just think I'm gonna enjoy the second one as well. Now, these were the 2 main book series that I want to focus on moving forward, and I do still have one. Not necessarily a series. It's a series, but it can be standalone. It's more of a novella series, but you can read those novellas out of order. As far as I understood, all of them happen in the same realm or the same environment, but like you're reading a collection of short stories, but they are within different novellas. And I'm talking about the Wayward Children series or Every Heart a Doorway series by Shannon Maguire. I loved the books I've read from this series. I already read 5 books. Those were half of my reads for the month of April. That's how much I just was mesmerized by these stories. These stories happen in a home owned by our beloved character from the series called Eleanor West. So each of these novellas actually relate in some way or the other to this home or the characters that we meet in this home, specifically if you start reading from the first book. So as I said, this is a series of novellas that technically you can read in whichever order you want. However, I found personally that if you don't read the first book, which is Every Heart a Doorway, if you don't read that particular one, you will feel something is missing, because that one actually sets the tone for everything that comes afterwards. However, I do feel that in no matter what order you would read this, like every book you read, it will spoil a little bit of another book. Not necessarily all of them together, but evidently once you read a book, there is some sort of an element that will be spoiled for another book, potentially several books, but at least one book will be kind of spoiled. But I don't think that is a problem, because you will still enjoy the worlds. These have been described as YA, if I'm not mistaken. They are fantasy books. However, I personally feel that they are written in a way that has that middle grade charm. The worlds maybe that they are describing, there's some whimsical elements, and there are evidently some gothic and darker themes involved. There's a lot of gender discussion, of coming of age in general. I feel like there's a lot of agency given to these characters. In my opinion, really great representations in general for overall characters. There's a lot of LGBTQ plus themes involved as well, and I feel it is overall a well-rounded collection of stories that takes you to a whole nother worlds, but at the same time there's a lot of core principles and thematic important themes that are being represented along the way. And it's such, I don't know, they are one of these books that I just keep thinking about. These are the type of books that generally kind of tug on my heartstrings, and I enjoyed them tremendously. And I'm actually sad there's only 2 books left for me, which will be the other two books that I will be reading within the month of May. The first one of the 2 is Across the Green Grass, and the second one would be Where the Drowned Girls Go. And I'm both excited and also a little sad, as I said, because I don't want these books to be over. I don't want this whole journey to be over. I want to have more of them. So I'm hoping that the writer will keep on doing this series. And I'm just, like, as I said, it's one of those things that it's a bittersweet thing that I want to continue and I want to read the next 2, but I also feel a little bit saddened by the fact that after I finish them, there's no more of these books, at least for the time being. But I am super excited nonetheless, and I want to continue with them. Now, for the last section of this video, I also want to mention that I am reading manga. I have started reading Dragon Ball manga. It's a shonen manga last month, and it's a very funny one, and I feel like that will be a kind of an interesting interlude between my other reads. I'm reading it in German, in the German edition. So the German edition have 3-in-1, like every 3 volumes they are actually in one book, and I have currently read, I believe, 8 volumes in total. That's actually what I was talking about in the beginning. I still have 1 volume to finish, and I will be finished with 10 books in this month. So I believe I can do that today. I will be able to read that, and in that I will be concluding the 10 reads for the month of April. It's a classic manga written by Akira Toriyama, and it's really an old and classic one for a reason. As far as I know, it's a major inspiration for other artists that writes other mangas such as One Piece and Naruto, and I just like feel like it's only appropriate to go back to the roots. I haven't read One Piece or Naruto. I have heard a lot of them, and I used to watch the anime Dragon Ball when I was a child. So I feel like I don't remember anything about the story, to be honest. I just remember the characters, how they look like, but I don't remember any scenes or plot story things, anything of that nature. But I do remember them being funny in my head and with some action. Now, as far as I understand, this specific manga started up as more of a comedy related or comedy based, with a bit of action sequence or action scenes. However, in the future, it starts to become more action packed and less reliant on comedy thing, which is unfortunate because actually it's very silly and lighthearted, and it can be a little bit creepy, and there's a lot of problematic things, but it's a work of its time, so I don't want to be really too harsh on it. I'm not gonna judge it. I'm just gonna read it for fun, and yeah, up until now there's a lot of funny moments and silly, over the top, quirky things. We follow the journey mostly of Son Goku, and he is a young boy that happens to be very strong and is trying to train in martial arts, and he wants to be a warrior, fighter, or ultimate warrior thing. Anywho, and there is these Dragon Balls, there's 7 of them, that each one of them has like stars inside, and they begin with 1 star, and then the 7th one has 7 star inside, and once you collect them, you can summon the dragon who would grant you a wish. Along the way, he would meet some friends and some enemies, and sometimes even enemies to friends, and it's very fun in general. So yeah, I'm super jazzed about that. I think it will be such a wonderful and light-hearted time. I will try to read at least 2 massive volumes, which means that I will read at least 6 full-on volumes. Now, that will kind of contain everything that I want to read, basically. However, I do want to also reread some of my favorite books, and I think I might start this month by reading one of my favorite fantasy standalones, and that will be The Sword of Kaigen by M.L. Wang. And it's such a wonderful, in my opinion, very unique story that actually resembles a little bit something of the animation vibes. If you like anime vibes, some especially action-packed anime vibe, and a little bit of a darker tone within a fantasy realm. And if you liked Arcane, if you watch Arcane, if you like that show, I think you would enjoy something like that. I think this is one of the books that will suit so many people. It's one of the few books that I personally feel very comfortable recommending because it's wonderful. Like it's easily one of the best fantasy standalones that I've ever read, and I do feel that it's not necessarily underrated but underknown, because I feel like if you look it up, a lot of people actually rate it high, but it's not known enough. I feel like a lot of people don't know about this book, and it's such a shame because it's a wonderful book. It contains darker themes, and it does rely heavily on the aftermath of war, but it's actually one of the strongest points about this book because it doesn't shy away from showing you that. And I feel like it's written beautifully as well, and yeah, I am super excited to, I hope that I get to reread it, because honestly, I do have two humongous books this month. By having The Shadow Rising, the fourth book in the Wheel of Time series, and Words of Radiance by Brandon Sanderson on my list, on my TBR list for the next month, it's gonna be a challenge for me to be able to also read The Sword of Kaigen, because The Sword of Kaigen is not as big as the previous two, but it's still not a small book. It's still a big one. So I don't know. And also reading the other books that I'm planning on reading. I have no idea how I would manage that, but I'm gonna try my best to do that. I do think that even though I did raise the bar a little bit by adding the reread, overall I feel that I did manage to cut down the list for quite a bit, to be honest. But I hope that I could continue on with this reading marathon or reading journey, because I love reading. So yeah, that's it for today's video. I know it was a little bit rambly, but I wanted to share my overall thinking process for the next month, and not only for the next month. I feel this included as well a longer plan for the upcoming future. But I guess the month of May will be the test, the run-up test for what to come, and hopefully things will go well. So yeah, thank you so much for watching. If you find this content interesting, feel free to subscribe, and I hope you're having a wonderful day or evening whenever you're watching this, and I also hope you will join me on the next one. Until then, take care. Bye bye.